the farmers' protest. Farmers and central government, they have been in talks for weeks on weeks now, fourth attempt of which has also seemed to have failed at the moment, with farmers saying that we will resume our Dilli Chalo march tomorrow on 21st of February. They are demanding that MSP on 5 crops is not enough for the next 5 months. We want MSP on all 23 crops and we want a legal guarantee, and until that happens, we will continue to march to Delhi.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's pretty fantastic if you look at how this whole story has panned out right from 2020 up until the 21st of Feb, which is tomorrow. And yeah, one thing is for sure that farmers are not giving in easily. They're not ready to blink, and they're definitely not willing to accept the terms and the proposals laid out by the government of India without giving it another nudge, another push towards extracting something more out of the government. Now, this extraction obviously is something which is going to cost the government and is going to cost the country heavily, and that is not something that the farmers seem to be taking into account. Now, let's just try and understand what are the real issues here on the table. The first being that the farmers want a legal guarantee on the MSP on 23 crops, right? That means the farmers want the government to procure, and whether the government decides to procure or not, at least pay that MSP on the 23 crops which the farmers produce, no matter whether there is any demand for those crops at all or not. Second bone of contention is, of course, on the fact that there's a certain formula for MSP. Now, the farmers say that please implement the MS Swaminathan formula, which is C2 plus 50%. The government is following the A2 plus FL formula, and there is some delta between the two. We'll come to discussing what these formulas really entail, right? And in addition to that,
higher MSP. Let's stick to that for now. 50% more commission
so farmers
than the comprehensive
what the
cost
government
of
has been paying them in the A2 plus FL is your actual variable cost of production plus the cost of family labor which you deploy. That labor is unpaid labor. So basically, the government right now is paying a salary, so to speak, in its current calculation of MSP to the family, the farmer's family, which are employed in making that farm produce available, right? The farmers actually ask for a C2 plus 50%, which is basically pay us for the produce, pay us for the salary, pay us for whatever is the rent on the land that I am paying, all these costs, including
the comprehensive cost.
The comprehensive cost, including the labor cost, plus a 50% markup. So farmers in basically are asking for a 50% net margin on cost, or let's say a 33% profit on revenue, right? So that's the broad bone of contention here. Now, no industry obviously works at a 50% margin, right? And I think farmers at some level need to understand that and appreciate that what they're asking for is absolutely foolhardy. And there is no government in the world which can afford to pay them that kind of money. In addition to that, they're asking for pension. In addition to that, they're asking for all the protest debts to be paid off and many other such, fairly banal demands. Now, all of this is largely instigated by Punjab farmers, but then you have farmers from UP and Haryana also towing the line. And I mean, who minds an extra buck, right? If you can piggy bank on the ride on the back of Punjab farmers protesting, asking for something better, there are other farmers also who are now joining the bandwagon. Broadly, this is where it is. Now, what the government did was, government yesterday evening said that, let's not look at 23 crops. Let's not talk about a legal guarantee. Let's just talk about increasing the MSP from the existing crops of wheat and rice predominantly, and bring in maize, oil seeds, pulses, and and cotton as well, right? So this is broadly the area under which the Punjab farmers operate. So cotton, for example, maize, oil seeds, all of these are critical to sunflower seeds specifically. So you have those sarson ke khet with those yellow colored flowers, and those seeds going into oil production, etc. So overall, you have you are coming out with more crops from the government's table, which are likely to benefit the Punjab farmers. But the Punjab farmers are saying nothing doing. What you're giving us is only half baked. We want MSP, a legal guarantee on MSP on all 23 crops, and in addition to that, we want the MS Swaminathan formula of C2 plus 50% being made available.
Okay, and let's delve deeper into what this will mean for the government before we actually comes to the pro and cons, and whether the demands are outrageous or foolhardy, as you said, as opposed to what many believe is their inherent right at the moment. But let's talk about the higher MSP, the C2 plus 50%. And you explained a little bit where you said that farmers are hoping to get a margin of 50%, which is more than any industry would ever expect and more than what government can afford to let go of. Now, government estimates are suggesting that it would cost the government approximately 10 lakh crore rupees, which is equal to the capital expenditure government made in on infrastructure 2022-2023. We don't have that much money, and government is already paying in farmers' welfare. So from crop insurance to various other doles that farmers get,
fertilizer subsidy, tax-free income.
All in all, Prime Minister Modi in various platforms in the past year has said that we have and we are continuing to pay farmers to the tune of 6.5 lakh crore rupees only in farm welfare towards various schemes at the moment. Can the government afford to shell out that 10 lakh crore rupees? Is it even fiscally possible?
I mean, see, if the government has to, if the government is arm twisted into agreeing, given that it is election year, the government will find ways and means to fulfill at least part of these demands, if not all of these demands. But it seems that the government is also willing to play hardball this time around. If you remember 2021, the government did give in to farmers' demands and did repeal those 3 farm laws. This time around, it seems that the government is willing to play hardball and is not willing to agree very easily to the demands of the farmers, knowing very well that what the farmers are asking for is something that any government in the world can ill afford. Now, India obviously continues to subsidize farm output with all these subsidies, 6.5 lakh crore rupees that you mentioned. And broadly, it boils down to about 50,000 rupees per farmer is something that the government is already doling out. It, in any case, makes India a frowned upon farm export country when you look at WTO. Farmers, on the other hand, are saying get out of WTO. What good is WTO, right? But WTO farm subsidies is something which has always been a bone of contention for the rest of the world versus India, because we continue to subsidize our farmers. We continue to subsidize the farm output, and hence we are also able to procure it at a certain price which makes it competitive globally, and hence India's exports of farm output become more competitive. But that is not something which the WTO takes very kindly. So the Indian government in any case is under pressure to reduce farm subsidies. At the other end of the spectrum, farmers now want these subsidies to stay and an enlarged MSP to go in. Now, 10 lakh crore rupees, like you said, is the overall infrastructure outlay of the country. And this is at a time when we are still far away from our target of 3% fiscal deficit. We are still looking at closing this year at 5.8, next year at 5.1, the subsequent year at 4.5. We are still a long distance away from 3%. I mean, you don't run a printing press where you can print currency notes and pay farmers, right?
So that's question number 2. Question number 1. Question number 2 at this point is it even good for farmers? Because a lot of economists that you and I have been reading over the last couple of days are saying farmers may want this, may like this, but they definitely don't want it. They definitely don't want a legal guarantee of MSP on 23 crops where, if we talk about crop diversification, that agenda may not be achieved because you will still stick to those 2 or 3 crops that are high yielding, will give you higher money in hand. In fact, there are other things that the farmers need at this point, and which is to ensure that they are sowing variety of seeds, to ensure that there is a demand for those variety of seeds. So perhaps they may like it to have higher money in hand or greater money in hand in the interim, but this is not what the farming sector in this country needs or wants in the long run.
So, the naysayers of the point of view of the government and those who seem to be sympathizing with the farmers right now, I mean, of course, one school of thought is what you just mentioned, that larger crop diversification with MSP may not have enough demand for that farm produce to be useful for anybody, and leave alone the fact that the government is going to, with a legal guarantee, procure that, right? So then what are you going to do with it?
And how do you legally guarantee it?
Yeah, so that's a different story. How do you legally guarantee it is a different ballgame altogether. But I'm saying that even if you were to give that legal guarantee and procure that, if there's no demand in the market, it all rots, right? So it is absolutely uneconomic to even toe that line.
Right.
But I think what the sympathizers of the farming community are saying right now is that if farmers get more income in their hands, then the consumption story is going to get a fillip. And we know for a fact that rural consumption has been slow.
Absolutely.
So at some level, what sympathizers and those who don't agree with the government's point of view of not increasing MSP, suggests that if you give more income in the hands of farmers, one way or another, either through subsidies or a higher MSP or legal guarantee on MSP or doubling of farmers' income or whatever means you want to employ, at the end of the day, farmers will have more money in their hands, and that money is going to lead to rural consumption taking off. And rural consumption picking up in any case is good for the GDP growth and the economic growth per se. So, but the point is, the government is better off actually building infrastructure with the same amount of money, which is going to have a multiplier effect in any case on the farm sector migrating outside of farms and coming into other forms of employment. And that is something which has happened across the developed world. For example, India's agriculture to GDP contribution is in the range of 15 to 17%. Compare this with the US, despite such large corn fields all over the countryside, the contribution of farm sector to GDP is just about 1%. So in any case, as economies develop, the government's capital expenditure has to be on infrastructure.
And not so much
as opposed to expenditures which you incur on an annual basis on subsidizing a particular section of society or giving dole to people just to artificially boost consumption. That is not economically prudent, and I think India should definitely refrain from getting trapped into that one-time dole in election year, which is then going to become pretty much the mainstay of the farm sector for years to come.
And even the supporters of farmers at this point are saying, obviously, subsidies and higher MSP cannot go hand in hand. So subsidies will have to be eventually revoked.
Either or. It has to be
either or, but that either or situation is not looking feasible at this point. You can't simply roll back subsidies and roll out higher MSP.
And even the government of India right now is on a very, very aggressive path of manufacturing, of infrastructure development, of overall boosting the ease of doing business climate in the country. On one hand, you cannot be seen as building infrastructure, getting manufacturing to come in and making India competitive globally, and at the other end subsidizing the farm sector and making your farmers uncompetitive. So, at some level we'll have to understand that if India has to develop, India has to progress, then that aggressive posturing on manufacturing, on urbanization, on infrastructure building should be the top priority of the government, and eventually get the farm sector to migrate out of the farmland, introduce more machinery, introduce more mechanized forms of farming, which are going to in any case yield better output at a lower cost. But the chunk of the population that continues to breed in the farm sector and wants to continue living in this very protected environment, courtesy the government of India, need to get a reality check and move out into more competitive sectors where they can contribute better to the economy.
And hopefully the government will be able to provide those leeways in terms of jobs availability in other sectors, but it's going to treat a very careful path for now, with elections around the corner, and farmers unrelenting are suggesting that they're going to come back to Delhi, will continue with their Dilli Chalo march from February 21st onward. This is a crucial time. The government is, of course, having conversations and dialogues with farmers. Farmers are sticking their neck out. They want higher MSP and they want a legal guarantee on that MSP. We'll continue bringing all those updates for you on News 9 here.